Hi, my name is Martin and I'm a specialist technical coach and mentor for open formula drivers. In this video, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about the 2025 F1 British GP from Silverstone. So if you're interested in what my thoughts are, definitely keep watching. Just before we kick off and start to talk about the race, I do just want to talk about Max's pole lap and what happened there at turn 4. Now, guys that have been following the channel throughout this weekend, you'll know that I haven't really been a big fan of Max's line into turn 4. It's a wider line, turning out from much wider, and I think you're asking the car to do a lot more work to actually meet with the apex of turn 4. I thought Lewis Hamilton was the best through there, taking what I call a tight line into turn 4, and it just allows you to save meters, avoid direction change from a speed at which the car is pretty clumsy. That's that kind of 100 km/h region. And yeah, I think I haven't liked Max's line all weekend into there. If I can give you just a quick insight into how Max Verstappen's picture as a professional racing driver looks to me, it's pretty much all perfect. And therefore, it's very easy to pinpoint the one weakness or the one issue. Imagine looking at a wall that's painted full of black squares, little black squares, and trying to find the square that's painted white. That's how it's like for me looking at Max. Most of it looks excellent. And yesterday he was amazing through the high speed. Only he could deal with the car in that downforce configuration. He was conservative but consistent in the final chicane. He found time where he needed to find time, and he was, accurate where he needed to be accurate. But I'll tell you where I think the lap time was in his lap. And again, I think it was his inability to meet with turn 4. So let me draw that out on the whiteboard now just for context. I'll show you Max's line, Lewis's line, and what it was worth. All right, hopefully you can see this on the screen in front of you. So this is Max's line. I'll draw it in red. The problem that I have is that he actually meets with this furthest edge of the racetrack here. And to change direction at slow speed means you're never really going to make it into the apex. You're going to do something like that. The cars don't like that quick hand change at that slow speed. And particularly because there's a big track width across here, you're covering a lot of ground, a lot of meters. So what Lewis was doing, which I was a much better fan of, is the tight line. You essentially just dive in like that and the car's straighter for a period. You save all of this extra meters across here, and it's a more obedient, more compliant car when you go and turn it in, because you're not worried about the right-hand steering to find this piece over here. So it's more compliant, more obedient, gets you into turn 4, and then allows you a nicer, better exit. So that's where I think the opportunity was for Max. So I'll just show you what those two lines look like now, and then I'll show you what it was worth. So I think this is Max's problem, as you can see from the aerial shot here, is he comes all the way to the outside of the track, just there, that curb, and you see he just doesn't meet with the apex. Now this was in practice too, I spotted this, and if you do get a chance to watch Max's onboard lap, it's pretty much the same thing, Max's pole lap I'm referring to. It doesn't quite meet in there, and I'm sure Max would have loved to meet in there, but it just, his line and the way he wants to take the corner is just not working. I think there's opportunities for him there if he can take the tight line. Let's take a look at what Lewis was doing now. So this was Lewis into turn 4, a lovely tight line. You see that there's not much direction change required when you don't use all of the available track width on entry. So the car's a lot more compliant, a lot more obedient on the turn in. Minimum speed is preserved, downforce is preserved, and beautiful run through here, good exit, good traction. So let me show you guys now in the telemetry what that was worth. Okay, so if we just compare the two fastest laps from both of them. Now, the reason Max got purple sectors in sector 1 was because of the speed. Like you see on the track dominance map, Max is flat, or everyone's flat through here, but because of that low downforce package, he's cleaning it all the way down to turn 3. So he's actually pulled a delta before the first braking point of 1.4 tenths. And now they go through that turn 3, turn 4 complex, and you see it begins to start highlighting red, suggesting that there's track dominance in Lewis's favor there before Max's downforce setup kicks in again. But by the end of it all, and before the braking of turn 6, Lewis has pulled that back to 0.035. So it's worth a tenth of a second, this line. So I think if Max can incorporate that into his game, then he'll be almost like a fully complete racing driver in my eyes, at least anyway. Now, look, this is not to take any shine off Max's pole lap. Like, it was a sick lap, but I think he did have a lot of top speed in hand as well. I think the areas where Max was brilliant, and having watched the pole lap back now, was turn 10 and 11. And you might be thinking, well, it's flat. What are you talking about? No, Max's line into there was so sharp that he just cut through 10 and 11 so quickly and didn't ask much of the car in terms of lateral direction change. I thought he did a good job in 7, long corner of constant radius. That's Luffield. And I think he nailed 15 as well. That's Stowe. And he didn't make any mistakes into the final chicane as well. So there are so many areas where Max was pretty much perfect. But I just wanted to call out because, again, that's the channel's name, right? Lower lap time. I've got to show you guys where the opportunities are around the lap and where the drivers can improve and what lines and different techniques are actually worth. All right, let's jump over to the race. What a crazy race it was. Normally I talk about the start and I go in chronological order. In this particular one, just bear with me. There's a lot of little areas that I just want to cover off, not necessarily driver coach related, but just give you guys my opinion on a few of the topics. Feel free to use the chapters in the video description if you want to jump ahead. I think I'll start with Lando Norris. Really classy, beautiful win, mistake-free weekend for him, and that got him the win. Super happy for him to have won his home Grand Prix. I think it's the first time he's won back-to-back ever in his career. So he won Austria last time out, won Silverstone this time out. And some of the stuff that he's putting together this year, like it's strange because he's winning some of the most difficult races to win and doing some of the most difficult things. So I'll give you an example. I put out a video just before the Melbourne race, and it was entitled The Exam Questions, What Lando Norris Needs to Do. Excuse me, my voice. What Lando Norris needs to do to win on Sunday in Melbourne. And it was like, get a good start, stay out of trouble, keep the car on the island, do good strategies. I mentioned so many different things, good restarts. He needs to keep his head, know when to risk, know when to push, switch over to dries on wets, wets on dries. He needs to tick all of those boxes, and I think he did that really well in Melbourne, and I wrote then Champions Drive, and he did that excellently. And that for me was as hard as it's going to get. Then he did the Monaco qualifying, that pole lap win in Monaco was crazy. And then this win here again in Silverstone, I think was beautiful. So good job by Lando. Congrats to him. Congrats to the top 3 as well. And hopefully can build a little bit of consistency. Lando's had a bit of an up and down season. He hasn't been a gel with the MCL39. I've got videos out on that talking about the struggles that he has with the front end of the McLaren. This MCL39's got a mega front end on it. And that was helpful today in the wet. But it's just every time Lando turns into high speed corners, then the front end pulls the rear around, and Lando's hands are too quick for the rate of steering and how strong the McLaren's front end is this year. So I'm not necessarily sure Oscar's taken a big step forward to overcome Lando. I think Lando struggled with the MCL39 and Oscar's just chipped away, and they've kind of met each other this year at a similar level just because it's taken Lando a little bit longer. So that was the whole point of the new suspension revision, was for Lando to get more comfortable with the handling, the front end of the McLaren, and Oscar didn't adopt that suspension update because he was happy with everything. So good job by Lando, double win back to back, and let's see if he can build some momentum in the second half of this season. So let's talk about the mistake, Oscar Piastri's mistakes. I just heard him in the cool down room say, well, as soon as the lights went out, then I knew I had to brake. And, obviously he's trying to leave his gap to the safety car so that, he can then control and manage the restart. That's true. I think the thing with it, Oscar, is that he did accelerate up for a few gears. So he went, duh, 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 and then when the lights went out, then the heavy braking, do, do, do. And that's where it's like, you can't, those two things I don't think should be together. It was a decent stop for Oscar, and he didn't need to do it. The lights can still go out and Oscar can just lift and bring that speed down gradually. Whereas, yeah, I guess what Oscar's saying was I didn't have much warning. I want to do my restart on the exit of turn 15 Stowe, which is what we spoke about yesterday, by the way, which is the best place to kick off the restart. Oscar's probably saying, and I'm talking to the track map now, so I'll bring it up for you guys. So I'm just trying to understand. So Oscar's probably saying, hang on, I saw the safety car lights go out here. I'm roughly here on the track, and I'm accelerating up to keep within my 10 car lengths. Then the safety car lights go out and I brake because I want to do my restart shortly after. So Oscar's saying it was all a little bit tight. I didn't have much warning and much time. And whilst that's true, I still come back to my initial point that there was a lot of acceleration and then a lot of braking. Now, look, I'm just talking to the rules and the guidelines here, which say that you can't do that. We spoke about these when they were first introduced, I think 2 weekends ago. And I said, Look, I said at the time, this rule's not good because what happens if that happens? Just someone can't see or someone spins or slides or whatever. Like there are these things where you look down at your dash and you look back up. There are so many things and situations that can happen, which means the cars can overtake each other under the safety car. And I said in that video, as long as they just resume their normal position, that's not the end of the world. Like what's the end? What's the problem with Max just coming back into position and then them resuming the restart? Nothing really. Same as Canada. I thought that was a storm in a teacup. But I understand on the grounds of safety, of course, particularly in these conditions, you don't want that stop-start nature under the safety car. And that's where I think Oscar went wrong. He should have just gradually brought that speed down. He definitely could have done that. And so I think the penalty was fair, to be honest. That's my honest assessment. I thought it was fair, notwithstanding the circumstances being challenging for Oscar, that he didn't have much time. He still could have done a better job in that situation. So that was Lando's win and Oscar Piastri's mistake. Now, I just wanted to talk about the importance of the recon laps, which are your only opportunity to see the track and try and experiment a few different wet lines and get a feel for the grip before the race. So that's kind of half an hour before they let the cars go. You're allowed to do a few laps. You've got to bring the car back through the pit lane because obviously there's all that stuff on the grid. There's all the machinery and equipment, and Brundle's doing his grid walk down there. And so, like I say, these are very, very, very important laps in the wet conditions, particularly if you're a rookie, if you're in Antonelli or Behrman or Hadjar or whatever, and it's the first time you've seen Silverstone in the wet in a Formula One car. It's your only opportunity to explore the track, find the grip, try the lines, try the brake balances. You've got a lot of work to do in that recon session. So look, I think the track was much slipperier than it ordinarily should have been in the wet. Why? Because we had a dry Friday and dry Saturday with the softer compounds that they brought here this weekend, and they're just laying heaps of rubber down on the track. The racing line is covered in rubber. And then we get the rain, and that makes that super slippery. As opposed to having a clean, green track and then it being raining, you probably get more grip in the rain in that situation. Not to mention a lot of the corners are line locked as well. It's very hard to offset your line and drive a wet line through corners like Copse, Maggots, Beckett's. These corners are all really line locked. It's only the long corners like turn 4, turn 6, where you can potentially try something different. But yeah, in some of those corners, that's why there's so much rubber on the track, and with that heavy rain, conditions were very, very slippery out there. So it's probably at this point I want to cover off whether or not Max made the right decision to trim that wing off, fight and compete for pole, take pole, and then really struggle out there with that downforce package there today. I still stand by what I said. I still think it was like, you've got to look at both situations. So if you trim the downforce off, you take pole, you're a chance of winning. Because, from the lead, there's the whole aero wash situation. You never know how much rain you're going to get. There's going to be times during that race when it's going to be dry. There's more opportunity from that position. Even in the rain, you've got more visibility from the lead. So that's situation A, and I was advocating for that because I think that was Max's only chance of winning that race. Option B is you play the safe option, come with a normal downforce package. McLaren would have surely out-qualified Max in that situation. He wouldn't have had that 3.5 delta advantage that we spoke about yesterday after qualifying. So where would he have qualified? 3rd, 4th? What's he going to do from there? Not much. Finished 5th. So that's why I say I still, even though it looked like it was totally the wrong thing and he had no grip, the alternate solution would have been to qualify P3, P4 and probably finish P3, P4 anyway. So Max is not here for P3, P4. He's here to win. And that's why I think the chances were that, yeah, like I say, that was his best chance of victory. Now, look, the McLaren was always going to be a machine in the wet. Why? Because mega front grip that we spoke about before, which Lando's been struggling with. That's exactly what you want in the wet because the front struggles to turn. And so you're just able to drive your wet lines, get the front into the corners. That's the most helpful thing. It helps you generate front tire temperature. The McLaren was always going to be a dominant car in the wet, even if Max brought a normal downforce package to this race and signed up to a normal downforce package yesterday in qualifying. He was shot either way. He was shot that way and he was shot the other way as well. So yeah, I think it just made for a more challenging afternoon for Max than it had to be. But again, I think, given where he is with this car, given where he is in the championship, and given what he's trying to do, that was his only play. And I still think it was the correct thing to do. Now, notwithstanding all of that, he was nowhere in the race. I mean, the rear wing was so skinny, and every time we jumped on board, he was just struggling with the rear. And the McLarens behind were just able to just apply throttle and apply traction on the exit of some of these corners, where Max just couldn't. His spin in under the safety, or just on the safety car restart at Stowe, was essentially that, just trying to accelerate from slow speed, turning on throttle at the same time. And look, if Max can't handle that car in those conditions, it must have been proper no grip at the back. So yeah, I think he did a good job all weekend, to be honest. I think he made the right call to go for it, try something, stick the car on pole, see what happens. Maybe you don't get any rain on Sunday, and you just aero wash through the S's, and you're a very difficult car to pass with that top speed. So like I said, I still think it was worth a shot, and I think Max still did a good weekend, notwithstanding that mistake at Stowe. That car was just on a knife edge all race. A quick note on all the rookies. There was a point at which I was looking at the drivers that were out, and I saw Colapinto, I saw Antonelli, Bortoleto, Hadjar. There's one more rookie, maybe I'm forgetting. But I was looking at 4 or 5 rookies on the out list, and actually I thought, well, that makes sense, right? Because it's their first time here in the wet. And then I was reminded back of Melbourne. All those rookies were out as well. So Hadjar had that crash on the formation lap. Antonelli had a good race. It was all the other ones. So Lawson crash, Jack Doohan crashed at turn 5, Bortoleto crash as well. So yeah, it was just those 2 races that we've had so far, those 2 challenging wet races. It was interesting to see. Now, a lot of the philosophies that you'll hear from everyone around F1 is the drivers are so well prepared the way they come into the season, and these young guys are coming in better prepared than ever before. That's the sort of talk that you'll hear from media and people in F1. I don't think it's true. I think they come in with big social media profiles, a lot of cameras, a lot of sponsors, a lot of money, not necessarily a lot of knowledge. The other thing you'll hear is that these are the best 20 drivers in the world. And I'm looking at these kids like, this guy's just turned 16, as near as makes no difference. Like, what would he know about driving? You know what I mean? And I'm 34 now. But look, within the 20 drivers that we have, yes, there are the world's best drivers in there, right? Your Hamiltons, your Verstappens, your Alonsos, your Leclercs, your Norrises, Piastris, and so on. Yes, there are the world's best drivers in there. But to go as far as to say all 20, the guys that just finished high school, for example, are the world's best 20 drivers in the world is stretching the definition, I think, a little bit. So, yeah, I thought I'd call that out because as I glanced across at the ladder, it was pretty much all the rookies out with the exception of Ollie Behrman. So look, I wanted to comment on Hadjar and Antonelli's one. I think the other ones were, Bortoleto just lost it. Lawson got crunched. I think that was Lawson's fault, by the way. He just turned in, even though he knew the Haas was on his inside, turned into turn 5. I think that was Lawson's fault. I just wanted to comment a little bit more on Antonelli Hadjar one. For me, Hadjar was like, there's more grip in that corner. So we're talking about Kopp's corner where the accident happened. Antonelli was very conservative. And look, these guys can't see anything at this point. So it is easier said than done. I've driven in conditions like that, and trust me, you literally can't see anything because on the onboard, you're on a camera much higher up than what the vision is. The vision's much lower, and the spray, like, it's just chaos. Like, even that red light flashing at the back does absolutely nothing. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is Antonelli was very soft into Copps. He was very conservative, and Hadjar was like, no, there's more grip. I can go in. He was expecting Antonelli to go in as well, but Antonelli was soft. Hadjar went in hard, and that's why he hit him. It wasn't like Hadjar was doing anything reckless or not going to make the corner or anything like that. It was just that Hadjar had a better feel for the grip through Kopp's corner at that time and thought Antonelli or the car in front would be doing the similar sort of speed. But Antonelli was pretty conservative, and then he got hit. So both of them were out. Now, look, just in terms of wet lines and what you're trying to achieve out there, I think the drivers were learning as they were going around. For example, Lewis Hamilton had a really poor first half of the race. And then I think once he learned like what he had to do and where he had to go and how to drive the car and so on, in the second half of the race, Hamilton was mega. He was on fire. So I think they were learning as they were going out there, just trying to find where the grip is. Again, shows you how important the recon laps are to be able to explore and try things. Just general wet line philosophy. I spoke about it in the live stream on Thursday. You need to do 3 things and achieve 3 things off the usual rubber racing line if possible. And it is normally feasible if it's possible. So to give you an example, the S's like turn 11, turn 12, it's not possible to get off the racing line. The track is so skinny at that point and you're just line locked and go through. But in some of the longer corners where there's significant track width and so on, then there's 3 things you want to achieve. Number 1, you want to break off the rubber for optimal braking grip. Number 2, you want to find a space, a place to do your rotation somewhere out from the normal racing line. Like I say, particularly if there's a lot of track width, you want to find a piece of space. Could be on the inside of the racing line, could be on the outside. Usually it's on the outside because there's more space. You want to do your rotation over there. So break off the rubber, rotate off the rubber, and then you want to also accelerate off the rubber as well. So generally you cross the normal racing line in 2 places, one under braking and one under acceleration. And then you do your normal rotation off the rubber as well. So that's a general theory anyway. And then, yeah, go check out the live stream if you want to have a look at that in more detail. But like I said, I thought the drivers were learning as they were going out there. Hamilton's still with a nice tight line into turn 4. That is off the rubber because a lot of the drivers are taking wider lines into turn 4 usually as well. So if I just jump over to the whiteboard and show you what I'm talking about. So like we drew before, the normal red line is people's normal racing line. So there's actually more rubber being laid down on that red line. If I just highlight it for you, and this is the key, this is what you need to do, is highlight where is the rubber. So it's all coming down here under braking and here, and then it probably sweeps out here. So there'll be rubber through here and here. And so by Hamilton taking that early turn in here in that green area, he's actually turning in off the rubber. So it doesn't always have to be a turn in outside of the rubber. You can also do your rotation out here as well. But Hamilton was still taking that tight line. So like I say, there's opportunities, you know, you got to explore. I can't tell you like one is right or one is wrong in the wet. You just really got to try both. Glance your delta on the steering wheel and make sure it says minus on it, which means you're going quicker than what you were the previous lap. Just wanted to finish the race on a strategic note. Yeah, look, as the race kicked off, I thought like dry tires. Surely the sun was out, it stopped raining, we had all that. I'm looking at the track from the TV, like this looks pretty dry. I'm surprised more drivers don't start on the dry tires. So Charles Leclerc and George Russell made that call very early to start on the dry tires. But then when they started going around on the intermediate, you get a feel for the amount of spray that's actually coming up. And you're like, yeah, intermediate actually makes sense. So places that looked dry from the outside on the TV, you know, were actually wet when they got going. So that was kind of my first insight, is that the cars need to get going really before you can make an assessment in many ways as well, which is interesting. And I think they all largely made the right call, except for, like I say, Russell and Leclerc. Something really interesting as well is like when the drivers pit to go onto a dry compound tire, you've got to be putting a soft compound tire on. It's if you're going to be taking that risk, like I think George made that risk, Antonelli as well. They're fitting like hards on these tires, like with say 12 laps to go or something like that, 13 laps to go. I think Antonelli came out on a set of hards when it started to clear up. And I'm like, why does it need to be hard? Like you're in a situation where it's wet, it's cold, it's going to be hard to get temperature. There's not long left in the race. Surely it's a soft, absolute worst case, you put a medium on if you just want to have the best of everything. Even though that was the wrong call in the end, I was surprised to see them put hards on. Like surely that's not a play. I'm not sure why they did that. But secondly, when they saw all of the struggles of the guys on the hard tires, for me, it was interesting that even they started to come in and pit. You know, we saw a lot of drivers struggling on the new dry compound tire. There was a case for just stay out on the intermediate and cruise at home, particularly for McLaren. Even when Piastri pitted and came out on those dries, had that moment in Maggots, had that moment in Maggots, turn 11 and turn 12, which is where George had his moment as well. So it was kind of like, yeah, just there was a case for those guys staying out and going to the flag as well. So I don't think it was the best race from a strategy point of view, and that therefore, you know, you had your opportunities there. There was the likes of Strolls and Hulkenbergs being able to execute better strategies and find their way up inside the top 5. That's all for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed my insights this weekend. What do we got coming up? I think it's Belgium, the next race. I'm going to be doing a live stream, obviously, to preview that, tell you everything you need to know about that. But look, I hope you've enjoyed my insights throughout the weekend. If you had a thought or question, definitely drop it in the comments section for me below. And as always, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Cheers.